Dear Father Flanagan, I am writing you to inform you that I can no longer continue my monthly contributions to your Boys Town, as it has come to my attention that you are housing a few criminals over there. Signed, Madame. Dear Madame, it appears you have been misinformed. We are not housing a few criminals over here, but several. Sincerely, Father Edward J. Flanagan. Boys Town was created to be a home and a hope for boys in need, including juvenile criminals. Its founder nearly died, dealt with chronic illness, had to travel all over the world in efforts to get ordained, delay after delay. He was threatened by the KKK, and after all of that, he came back to Omaha to get a most unexpected call from God to help young boys in need. This man, now Venerable Father Edward J. Flanagan, founded Boys Town for boys who were orphaned, traveling in boxcars, and those who were being chewed up by the criminal system. Many of these young men were at a fork in the road. One way, a hard, uncertain life that may end in prison or death. The other way, Boys Town. Fortunately, these days, we do not have a dearth of young men who are arriving in the middle of Nebraska in boxcars and are perennially homeless. But what does Boys Town do then today, if not care for these boys? What is it up to in the 21st century? How has it become the child care and health care icon that it's recognized as now? Today, we got the full tour of the history of Boys Town and Father Flanagan's life and his legacy, as well as what Boys Town is in the 21st century. We did a quick skip across campus to the Boys Town Hall of History where we began our tour. We're here with Shannon, who's going to give us this awesome tour of the Boys Town Museum. Can you tell us about where we're at right now in the beginning?
Sure. We are near the headlines of the time, really giving you a snapshot of what it was like around that time. Kids were abandoned, orphaned, just kicked out of houses because they couldn't afford to feed all of them. And you can take a look at the headlines. They're pretty wild.
The beginnings of this museum tell us how Father Flanagan got his start, because this wasn't work that he had anticipated taking on in the beginnings of his life. You know, he was very sickly and had to work an awful lot just to be ordained, but then this work sort of fell into his lap. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. When Father got to Omaha, Nebraska, he started working with men in what was called the Working Men's Hotel. Men who would come in and out every day, men who had attained some bad habits and things like drinking and gambling and that sort of thing. One of the men said to Father, "I really wish that I had had you when I was a boy." And Father sort of realized that he wanted to help these people earlier on in life to give them a real chance in life. And so in 1917, he started Boys Town with 5 boys, some from the courts, some from just kids who were on the street. And so word kept spreading about Boys Town, and more and more and more boys came. So why not girls?
That's right.
Girls were considered more respectable and trustworthy, and so they went into domestic service, which wasn't always a great situation for them. It was sort of like indentured servitude. But they had, for the most part, they had a place. Boys didn't have a place. Boys weren't trusted. We had all kinds of kids coming through Boys Town. This one always gets to me. Dale here, he got put on a bus with a sign around his neck basically saying, "Get me to Boys Town." And somehow, by some miracle, he did. He got here. And there were kids who had committed crimes because they had no other choice in their minds. Lots of theft because they needed to eat. And so the public in general saw these boys as basically a nuisance.
Mm-hmm. But so Father Flanagan began, as you said, with grown men, and then was inspired, and it evolved into caring for young boys, because he could see sort of the plight of the young boy beyond just not having like parental care, but what happens when you don't have parental care, right?
Yeah, definitely. There were kids, very, very young kids, who were just left behind. They were sent to orphanages and things along those lines. they all had a very sad story, to be truthful.
Tell us about this huge home here.
Well, the first home Father was able to rent with the help of a friend, Henry Monsky, a local attorney who happened to be Jewish, Father's very good friend, loaned Father $90 to rent this first building that was located on Dodge Street, which is our main street in Omaha, Nebraska. And they quickly grew out of it. What started with 5 boys then became 25, and more showed up every day. So they outgrew this particular house, and they moved to the German-American home, which rent was dirt cheap at the German-American home because it was right after the war, and it wasn't really safe for Germans to be meeting in big meetings at that time. So they were able to get the bigger place here. It was great. It had a bowling alley in the basement and things like that. The kids loved it. They would take public transportation to school. Unfortunately, locals didn't care for our boys because, number one, Father accepted kids of all races and creeds, and that was not a popular stance at the time. Mm-hmm. But also because they just felt that it wasn't good for the neighborhood and things like that. But they outgrew this house as well.
One thing that I had heard when we were doing a tour prior to this private tour that we've got going on here is that all of this was sort of made and put together by the Smithsonian Museum. Like, they made all the stuff, and then in the back, actually, the newer section was made by a local company. But one thing that I thought was cool as I was walking through and noticing is you see these little pop-out pictures here, and you see this picture of a boy, and you can kind of tell the background. There's some stairs there and like a balcony. But then you have this huge picture over here of the German-American home, and you can tell, you can place him right there. So it's just interesting to see these overlaps, these real clips, like bringing the very real reality of this world to life. So Father Flanagan, beautiful portrait here, outgrew the German-American home, and so then he did a next big step. What was that?
They moved out here to what was called Overlook Farm because it overlooked all of Omaha, and it was the highest point where you could see everything. It was basically the middle of nowhere. A farm where they moved to, and took them about 9 hours to walk from the last house to this spot. There were only chicken coops on the land at that point, so the boys slept in the chicken coops at first, and then Father began his big fundraising movement to try to supply them with a building that sort of encapsulated everything: the dormitories, classrooms, food, service, that kind of thing. But Overlook Farm was a real blessing because people left us alone out this way.
And then the beginnings of getting stationed at Overlook Farm. You see here, that's the first entry arch to Overlook, and then it was changed to the iconic Boys Town Arch, which we showed you in the beginning of this video. We've got some interesting artifacts right here. Can you quickly tell us just about these two huge things behind us?
Oh, these two huge things, yes. This is the original windmill for the farm. It's cut down significantly because our building is just not tall enough for it. And then we also have the original gas pump here. And we say the words gas pump all the time, but the truth is they did actually have to pump gas to get gasoline into their vehicles because this was not electrical.
Right. Okay, so now Father Flanagan has his land. He's going to move all of these boys into Boys Town, but it's not just a space to live. It's an actual town, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about how he literally got this place built brick by brick?
Father Flanagan was a master marketer before that was a thing. He sent out all kinds of materials to the public, but he never shied away from showing the boys that were of different races or religions because it was important to him that people knew he was taking every child, every boy who needed him at the time. We had a post office, a police department, well, we still do, excuse me, a post office, a police department, a fire department, paramedic, all of that within our little 1 square mile of the space that we call Boys Town today.
And what do we see over here? All of these comics and things. What was this? This is Father Flanagan's genius right here. Shana will tell us about it.
Yeah, at the time, of course, there weren't televisions, and not everybody even had a radio, but a lot of people could afford newspapers. And newspapers had the funnies. Everybody loved the funnies. They weren't just for kids. And so Father was able to get either Boys Town or his image into all of these different comics to get the word out about Boys Town and kind of put it in the public consciousness. It was really important for him to let everybody know what we were doing because he was so happy to accept donations of 25 cents, $1, $5. And he would write thank you letters for every single one that I can see.
So this is cutting edge. I mean, I think today nobody is really surprised or put off by comics and what do we call those, like ad placements almost. And these aren't ads, this is like real good work, but it was not something done back then, and it shows how forward thinking and smart he was to get this done. But also this work of creating a space and a place for boys, it wasn't just getting boys off the street, it was actually forming them and molding them and being genuinely a father and a mother to these kids. So can you walk us through a little bit of what life was like here and what all came with being a boy in Boys Town?
Sure. I like to think of, and this is just my opinion, but I like to think of Father Flanagan as an early proponent of child psychology. He didn't blame the kids for how they came to be. He knew that he needed to speak to parents to teach them how to treat children. And that was just sort of unheard of because children were seen and not heard at the time. Mm-hmm. So Father brought boys to Boys Town, mm-hmm. or they showed up or what have you. We've got examples of the dining hall. You can see the boys. It really kind of was at times every man for himself, but they were supposed to make sure all of the boys got something to eat, and they did.
But also you see, too, there's this awesome art installation here where the boys would play marbles at Boys Town. And we heard previously that the boys were actually originally playing with marbles that they made essentially out of mud. And the community came around and was like, the boys of Boys Town need marbles. And so tons and tons and tons of marbles were donated to them. So they would go from, I think earlier we walked by Boxcar Billy to getting to be boys playing marbles, and beyond that, getting care and education and living really well-rounded lives. Can you talk to us about the lifestyle that was provided for boys here at Boys Town?
Sure. Marbles were also very inexpensive in a way to get our kids to be able to play. Quite often they were just surviving up to this point, and Father wanted to remind them that they were kids. They needed to play, they needed to pray, they needed to go to school, all of the things that regular kids do. And Father was the one to try to remind them, slow down, you can relax now. One of my favorite quotes of his is, "You're home now, dear." I thought that was really special because it was almost like they could finally breathe. And so we have examples of the sort of setup for the dormitory, and kids were just really, really happy to have a bed at that point. There was no disagreements about, getting in each other's space. They were just grateful to have a place to sleep and something to eat. And Father also, besides school, there were activities like choir. Christmas was a really big deal here at Boys Town. A very, very big deal was made out of it. And kids sometimes got their very first possessions that were just for them. And that's kind of a big deal if you think about it, because we have so much. They had nothing.
And care for these boys beyond just providing each child with gifts. I think they each got 2 gifts for Christmas. Like one was a practical gift and one was something maybe not so practical, but just nice to have. But beyond just care for education and formation and whatever, they also had some physical needs. And in some ways, the community around Boys Town came together, right? We see some of these things here. Can you speak to who provided what for these boys?
Sure. Creighton University here in Omaha, Nebraska has a dental school. They've had it for a very long time. So they would come and help out our boys regarding their teeth. which was really important because, like I said, a child in survival mode is not thinking about brushing and flossing. So they had some really damaged mouths, and that's painful. And so Father made sure that they had the care they needed in that regard. We also had doctors and teachers, of course. We have got the trades right here. Father thought it was really important that kids leave Boys Town with a skill, an employable skill. So there were things like leatherworking, woodworking, drafting, printing, and like now there's auto repair, CNA, like nursing. It was just always very important to him that they left to be good American kids who had a skill and somehow could help humanity. Father also believed in the importance of play. When you can finally breathe and relax. There were sports, which were maybe the first time in their lives they ever got to play a sport, which was a big deal. So there was boxing and football, in the early days basketball, but people didn't always like to play us because we had boys of different races.
But these boys, too, I mean, they're rambunctious boys, so from time to time they'd get a little heated, and Father Flanagan had a good trick for helping these boys sort that out, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, if boys were having an argument, he would call them to the ring. They were to box it out, but what he didn't let them know is that he put weights in the gloves, and so they got really tired really quickly, and all was forgiven.
So over here, we also have Father Flanagan's boys shows where the boys would go around and tour and perform, and it was a way to have some fun, maybe earn some money for Boys Town, but it didn't always work out quite like you would hope. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. With the traveling, they would go all over the country, and there were definitely some places that they weren't wanted, and they were essentially run out of town by groups like the KKK or just angry citizens. It happened often enough that eventually they had to stop having the shows. But boy, they sure tried really hard. They would recite poetry, tell jokes, sing, play instruments. Just another way to get the word out, but also another way to get donations.
And also, as Boys Town grew and got more recognition, the story didn't just put off some people, but it actually inspired some people, including Father Flanagan, to put some works out into the world for people to listen to. He had a radio show. Can you tell us about his radio show?
Father Flanagan became a national sort of treasure in regard to parental advice. Which, you know, he's a priest, which is funny, but he certainly had experience because he had a lot of children. And he knew that kids needed love. They didn't necessarily need a whole lot of physical interventions in their lives. What they really needed was to be listened to be appreciated, and to be loved. And it was important to him to provide that.
And it grew even more in terms of getting attention on Boys Town, where it became not just one, but two movies. There's Boys Town, where you have Spencer Tracy and Mickey Rooney, and then there was even the sequel, Men of Boys Town. But Spencer Tracy got an Oscar for his performance in this movie, and he donated it to the museum. You can see it here. Can you talk a little bit about what happened here and the effect it had on the actors and on Boys Town?
Sure. The interesting thing about Spencer Tracy was he said no to playing Father Flanagan a couple of times, not because he didn't want the role, because he didn't think he was worthy of playing Father Flanagan. And he had a conversation with Father even before he accepted the role, just sort of saying, I am so nervous, not about the public, what they think, but about what you think of my performance. And Father reassured him, of course. And so when Spencer Tracy won the Oscar, he basically immediately gave it to Father Flanagan and the boys. And you can see on the Oscar itself, on his chest, there's a little area that's rubbed away. Boys would come and rub that spot for luck before they would play sports or what have you. Mm-hmm. Mickey Rooney, well, he was kind of a kid himself, so we always have some funny Mickey Rooney stories, like he was curious about the girls in town. So the movie was made here at Boys Town. People assumed that we received a whole lot of money from the movie, but actually they only received enough money to repair the damage that was done by the filming vehicles and that sort of thing.
All right, and then here behind us, too, we have the iconic "He ain't heavy, father, he's my brother" photos and statues and things, and even going like all down this wall, we can see there's just several iterations of the statue with different boys and even a girl at one point. Can you tell us a little bit about how this came to be the visual for Boys Town?
Sure. Initially, the first symbol of Boys Town was a young boy with his arms outreached. And I think Father maybe thought that was a bit needy. His boys were important and not begging for money. And so when he saw this two brothers sort of artwork in a magazine, he immediately contacted the magazine, said, "I love that. It really fits what we're doing here. I would very much like to have the rights to this image for free." And he got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So unfortunately, Father Flanagan did sort of die unexpectedly. And so Boys Town had to continue on, and it changed hands here to the Right Reverend Monsignor Wagner. Can you tell us about this transition and how things continued to grow after that?
Sure. Father Flanagan was a big ideas kind of guy. He had really amazing thoughts. He worked himself to death, truly. And so Monsignor Wagner sort of inherited a little bit of a mess. There was some debt, and he was able to help Boys Town get out of that hole and add more buildings. Like we have the field house where the boys play sports, music hall for musical related events, and cottages where the boys would live.
And then we see here down this wall, there's just a big mashup of different things. I mean, you have the metal sign for the trade school. It's showing a lot of this growth that was happening in the community. We have the Boys Town Police Department and Fire Department. You said Boys Town has always had its own police department and fire department, right?
From the early days, yes. Not immediately right away, but from the very early days, they did, yes.
And there was also very special care given to the boys and girls at Boys Town because this was very much grassroots and self-sustained effort that was aided by generosity from the surrounding Omaha and the world and whatnot. But the boys also helped around Boys Town, and so there was its own Boys Town credit union, right, with its own currency and things. Can you tell us about how this worked and what the boys could earn and what they could do?
So the boys all had things that they needed to accomplish, whether it be chores, working on the farm. They also, in the trades that they were taught, cutting hair, becoming a tailor, that sort of thing. So they had opportunities to make some money. We had Boys Town currency, which they then could switch out for real money, especially before they left. And sometimes that set them up for a real beginning at life.
Boys didn't just learn professional skills, but they also got to get their hands dirty learning about agriculture, and there's a little bit more about agriculture around the corner here that we can look at. But can you give us just the plain view overview of all of these things here, what they learned, how they were clothed and things like that?
Sure. So with the barbering, they had to practice on each other. So there was a learning curve and some mistakes were made. But that's okay. Tailoring, a skill that was really important. These kids, they didn't have a lot of clothes, so there was a lot of repairs needed. And the boys themselves learned how to become tailors, and some of them made that their profession later on as well. We had, at a certain point, we ended up with, of course, yearbooks, school plays. Boy Scouts was a big thing for us. Sea Explorers, which I do find funny in the middle of Nebraska.
Nebraska.
And then this sort of gives us an idea of just what it took to feed that many hungry boys. And there's a list here of Boys Town's needs for 1 year, and the number of eggs is shocking.
It's a lot of food for a lot of people, but especially what do they call them? Strapping young men. But here we're talking about the agriculture. Can you tell us about, what we're looking at, how it got here, and what this boy is modeling?
John Deere donated 2 tractors, one of which was essentially cut in half so boys could learn the inner workings and how to make repairs and things. That's an invaluable skill, especially in the Midwest in that era. Becoming a farmer was a total possibility at that point in their lives.
So on top of these real, true life skills, obviously Father Flanagan emphasized getting to play. And so we have here an extensive collection of all of Boys Town athletics, who they played, how far maybe they had to go to play, who oversaw them and, coached them and guided them. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Our boys had to travel very far to find teams that were willing to play a team that had different races and creeds and that sort of thing. But the great thing about that, them having to travel far and wide, is that people came to watch. Tens of thousands of people came to watch. And they saw our boys from Boys Town, saw what they were made of. We had some really excellent teams.
And they got trophies and things too. We were talking about this a bit before when we were looking in the archive, which is a special thing that I can show for some people later. But the boys traveled in style. This is a very nice bus. Got some footage of the inside earlier, but they bussed all around town, and they didn't only travel far and wide for athletics, but they also traveled quite far for music because that was near and dear to Father Flanagan's heart, right?
And Monsignor Wagner's as well. The choir became internationally known, so they traveled and put on shows that several thousand people came to watch. They made an album with the Everly Brothers, which was a really big deal. It just gave the boys a chance to see the world.
It's very cool. And then this tour, as it is right now, it's very sepia toned, a lot of that brownie, a lot of that black and white, but it's a testament to the history of Boys Town. And yet, Cassie, our tour guide yesterday, had said, this is almost like the Wizard of Oz, where now we come into the modern day and it's Technicolor, and we can see, Boys Town isn't a home for orphaned boys as much as it was back in the day, and yet it still serves not only young boys but also young girls as well, and it's taken on this entirely new life and work while still keeping its core and beginning dream, the beginning desire alive. So can you tell us a little bit about what Boys Town has going on today?
Sure. We do have kids who live on campus in our family teaching homes. It's 2 parents. They may have 1 or 2 children, and then 8 boys or 8 girls in the home. They live on campus. They go to school on campus. And they learn their trades and things on campus. It's really important, and it is it's certainly where we're known. We're known for having kids on our campus. But as you can see, there's so much more that we do now that it's almost impossible to talk about it all. But we have gone out into schools teaching the Boys Town model. Kids learn how...
That's around this corner here, right? You can get some of that visualized experience here.
Continued care after graduation we call Successful Futures. Kids are given scholarships or apprenticeships and that sort of thing, which is really, really important. We also have culinary arts now, which is super cool. And so we're helping them beyond graduation, which didn't used to be the case because they just didn't have the capability, but now we do.
So now you're getting kids from youth to graduation and even beyond, and Boys Town is reaching out into broader community with the Boys Town model. And then there's even a press, right? Can you tell us a little bit about the Boys Town Press and what they do?
The Boys Town Press really focuses on books for kids that teaches them social skills, perhaps how to treat kids who may have differences from them, bullying, that kind of thing. There's also lots of books for parents and teachers, which is always necessary. Everybody needs help now and then. So the Boys Town Press does a lot.
And then Boys Town is also still very popular locally. There's the corporate sponsor, Godfather Pizza. And it's also very popular around the world. There's this whole wall here of these different boys' towns in the U.S. and just abroad. And they're all working on similar things. But this boys' town here, the original, settled within, at this point, Omaha, also has expanded into a medical and health field. I think we can see on the wall behind her, there's core areas of research: hearing and balance, behavioral health, speech and language, and neuroscience. So can you talk to us a little bit about what we see here with this technology and what is going on in Boys Town, actually just behind us in this building?
It's really cutting edge. It kind of blows my mind. If you've ever had an MRI, you know it's essentially your whole body in this very small tube. Now, for kids who may have epilepsy or different issues with their brains, they actually can sit and play a game, and the scan itself is just around their head, not scary, and they respond really well to that. The tube is just it's just not my favorite either.
It's a bit much. But yeah, so Boys Town has continued to contribute. You were telling us that they have helped with research for cochlear implants, with hearing in general. They focus this healthcare specifically for kids, and it continues even to this day. Like you were telling us that the building, the healthcare building, is being remodeled or expanded, I guess is the accurate word, as we speak, and they're working on some new things. And then we also were discussing earlier that on top of what everybody has done to rally around and support Boys Town has also, in its own way, kind of given back and given some awards and honors to some very recognizable names. Can you tell us about this Service to Youth Boys Town Award?
Well, we began with Mrs. Spencer Tracy, who was the widow to Spencer Tracy. Their son was born with a hearing disability, and she started the process of just really opening the world for him and other kids. And so she was the first to receive our Service to Youth Award. Many people after: Mother Teresa of Calcutta, Nancy Reagan, Tom Osborne, Michael Jordan, lots of names, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And all of these people were just pretty grateful to come out and receive this award because they knew it had to do with helping kids.
All right. And then we also had discussed earlier that Father Flanagan made quite a lot of friends. He was so convicted and so true to himself that he had friends who very much, liked and approved of him, even if he had some criticisms to offer in response. But many of these friends, whether they simply appreciated what he did or were able to work with him in some way, they kind of gave back a little bit here. And can you tell us about, some of the friends and who all has made themselves known as a presence and a friend to Father Flanagan?
Sure. We still have friends. So we have more recent things like Bud Crawford's boxing gloves, a basketball signed by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and we have an Emmy. And we go back to things like old Hollywood stars, Bing Crosby, Tom Mix, Bob Hope. We have had a lot of famous friends over the years. Babe Ruth was a friend to Father Flanagan, a real friend. Babe Ruth was an orphan as well, and he actually made a trip to Boys Town shortly before he died because it was such an important thing for him. And yeah, we're still trying to get the word out about what we do, but we have some really great friends.
It's really incredible to see the roots of Boys Town and how it has continued to grow. The mission has not lost steam at all. It's just continued to be a blessing both for the local community and to the world, for people who travel here to get health care or people locally who get support and help for their families, for themselves, for their futures. It's really beautiful to see all of this work that started with one man and has grown into this incredible campus in Nebraska. Shannon, thank you so very much for giving us this awesome tour and for all of the other little special things that we've gotten to do here today. I very much appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We will talk to you later. Bye.